Welcome to the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Hannah O'Brien, both a veteran spouse and the program manager for the Veteran Spouse Network. On each episode of our show, I will host different guests to learn more about the stories, unmet needs, and resources available to our military and veteran families. We're the show that's making space for your stories, so that here you know you're never alone. Welcome back to the Veteran Spouse Network podcast. If you're a regular, you'll know that in last month's episode, I began sharing my own story of making the decision to start a family, trying to get pregnant, and of the experience of being pregnant with my now two children. I had intended last month's episode to also include my birth stories and experiences navigating postpartum life. But as I reflected on my experiences prepping for that podcast, I really felt that in order to do this topic justice, it needed more time and space. So I set out to do a two-part, where this one would be covering birth and postpartum, but alas, while I was creating the outline for part two, I just felt that it was getting longer and longer, and I was having trouble figuring out how to cut it. The whole reason I wanted to cover this topic on the podcast was to shine a light on a topic many of our population are navigating and too often are suffering in silence through, or feeling like they have to shrink their joy. When honestly, I feel confident saying that many of us women probably feel like this is like the most important thing we've ever done and maybe ever will do with our bodies and our lives. So I didn't want to sell the experience short, and I wanted to be able to be vulnerable with you all, but I also didn't want you to have to sit and listen to a 3 hour podcast. So, this will be part two of what is now a three-part It's a Mother series. And this month, I'll be focused on sharing my birth story with my two children. And next month, you'll get to hear about the joys of postpartum life. I always like to say, when I'm sharing my own story, that it's just that. This is just my own experience. But in the last 4 years of living this life, it's really blown me away how little time we spend talking about this topic. Getting pregnant, growing a life, birthing that life, feeding that life with your body really is as close to a supernatural experience as I certainly have ever come. It's transformational physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And not only is it filled with like indescribable amounts of joy, but it's also one of the most difficult things that we as women navigate. And as we all know, all challenges are made more difficult when we feel alone. That's the whole reason we exist. And this is certainly a topic or a part of our lives where, as women, that happens. And for me, myself, there were many instances throughout this journey of motherhood that where I felt alone, sad, scared, angry, judged, even shamed. And I've talked with many other mothers who have felt their own version of those feelings. So since becoming a mother, I have set out to do what I can to ensure no other woman has to feel that way. And for me, this is a huge part of that. So, first and foremost, I really do want to thank you, our listeners, for being here and holding space for my story. So, last month, again, talking about decision to have children, fertility issues, and my pregnancy experience. So, we ended talking about the end of my pregnancies. So naturally, what happens next is that you are supposed to give birth to a human. A human person is supposed to come out of your body, and that's supposed to just be chill. Happens every day, right? Multiple times a day. So I wanted to share my birth stories, and I will trigger warning, or give trigger warning that I may share some details that maybe other people think are gross or gory. I don't intend to get too weird and graphic here, but I don't want to sugarcoat things. I think there's too much of that going around, so I don't want to contribute to that. So let me start by telling you a bit about some of my biggest fears. I am a relatively anxious person, and a big theme of my anxiety surrounds situations where I don't feel in control of my own body or physical safety. Flying, in planes as a prime example of that. I've really been afraid of flying my entire life. Um, it's a situation where I'm trusting my body and my life to two pilots I never get to meet or talk to. And if the plane starts kind of bouncing around, I don't get to know if it's like a no stress, chill, turbulent situation or if the pilots in the cockpit are like literally shitting their pants. Anyway, I digress, but I've been really scared of doctors my entire life. Like so much so that my parents like said we had religious obligations to me getting shots when I was younger because they just truly paralyzed me with fear. Thankfully I've gotten over that one. Another example is when I was young, I sat on the handlebars of one of those like old metal merry-go-rounds they used to have in parks. Some of them still do. They, for the most part, seem to be safer. Like I've seen ones where they put them in the ground. Anyway, um, so I sat up on the handlebars. The centrifugal force caused me to swing back. I smashed my head on the base, fell off, blacked out, huge gash on my head. And I legitimately begged my parents not to take me to the hospital because I was so scared. And my now paramedic husband reminds me frequently that I definitely should have gone to the hospital. But hey, I'm fine. Also, I do want to say after those two stories, like my parents are amazing. Do not judge them. I was a disaster, and they did their best to toe the line between keeping me healthy and keeping me happy. Um, like I've only ever had to get stitches once. I've never had surgery. I've been really lucky, but that also kind of makes it easier to be scared because I haven't had a lot of those types of experiences. Um, so my absolute biggest fear about making the decision to start a family was about birth. I honestly wasn't sure if I'd be able to do it. And, unfortunately, you can't really like take it back or, opt out of the birth part. And I would literally like have nightmares where I went into labor and I'd be begging the doctor to like turn back the clock because I couldn't do it. And like, what would happen if I felt that way when the day came? Would I rally? Would I crumble? Would an already terribly difficult experience turn into my nightmare? I didn't want that for my birth of my child. I didn't want to feel that way. And I hated that I couldn't know like how I would feel until it was happening. And I will say, like, I did have some similar fears about being pregnant, like not knowing what could happen to my body physically. And what very pleasantly surprised me about becoming pregnant was it did actually did wonders for my anxiety. So, all you anxious people out there, you know how people and therapists encourage you to not stress about what you can't control. And you're like, cool, thanks. I'll get right on that. Like, that's what anxiety is, right? I wouldn't have anxiety if I could choose not to stress about the things I can't control. Well, here I was, pregnant with a literal other life force in control of my body. And for me, somehow a switch flipped that allowed me to really take that advice. I wasn't in control. I didn't get to be in control. So I could choose to stress about it and be in hell, or I could choose to just focus on what I could control. And magically, all of a sudden, that felt a lot easier. And not to say I no longer had anxiety or that I can do that with everything every time in the present, but it was a huge mental shift for me. And of course, I also want to acknowledge that um, I didn't work to flip that switch. I really was lucky. Something about this experience like, literally flipped a switch, and a lot of my anxiety just vanished, especially about that thing that was such a fear for me, not being in control of my body. So as the birth of my daughter approached, I had a lot more experience like going with the flow than I previously had, especially when it came to my body. And I wasn't as scared as I expected to be, but I definitely still had fears as we approached the day. So let's start with my daughter, my first time giving birth. Um, as I mentioned on the last podcast, I had gestational diabetes with her. And so when you have GD, they don't want you to deliver past 40 weeks because essentially you run the risk of having like a bigger than normal baby, which, as you can imagine, makes delivery more high risk. So they schedule you an induction date, which essentially is an appointment to have a baby. That's not to say that that's when you'll have the baby. You can go into labor early for any number of reasons. Anyone can. And because GD is low risk, they also warned me like low risk when it comes to like big medical things, big. pregnancy risks. They also warned me that we could potentially show up for our induction appointment, and if there happen to be a bunch of women giving birth, they could just say, "Nope, not today," and send us home. So my daughter's due date was April 8th, and our induction was scheduled for April 6th. And even though I knew I could go into labor earlier, it honestly was really helpful to me to have like a date on the calendar. Um, your due date is a date on the calendar, but like if you haven't heard this, unfortunately, it doesn't like really mean a whole lot. Most people go past their due date, and anyone can give birth earlier. But for me, that helped, and I honestly didn't spend very much time stressing about going into labor earlier, which surprises me because I ended up having a ton of feelings about that with my second pregnancy, but I guess it was just one of those like ignorance is bliss type situations. I didn't know anything about going into labor or giving birth, and I couldn't control it, so why waste time thinking and stressing about it? So proud of first pregnancy Hannah. She was just killing it with the letting it go. In my third trimester, I got asked if I wanted to participate in a study that was testing like this means of inducing labor. So basically, I would go to the doctor the day before my induction and they'd insert this little balloon in me to see if it would induce labor more naturally. And of course, like being a researcher myself, like I'm always down to support studies. So I was like, yes, sign me up. And then also maybe this can help me like go into labor naturally the day before my induction appointment. So I knew that was happening too. And then in the weeks before my induction date, like we were so busy, I honestly don't think I had time to focus like on being scared. I was so stressed about my like work, like setting my team up for success, for being gone for 3 months. It honestly seemed like a lifetime to me, and there was so much to do and cover with them. My husband and I had swapped homes with my parents a couple of weeks before my induction date because we felt our house was too small and noisy to bring a baby home. See, my parents are amazing. So we were also kind of like moving, one of the biggest stressors. Oh, and the biggest stressor. We were in the middle of buying a house. What naive little dummies we were. I remember my dad said, like, my grandfather gave him advice because I can't remember what they said. They got married and bought a house in the same year. And the advice my grandfather gave my father was like never do more than one big thing at a time. Like it's going to be really stressful. So yeah, here we were about to have a baby, buying a house, somewhat moving, like, uh, eh, horrible. My husband had just started like a new job somewhat recently, like a new career. God, it was a lot. Um, on the house front, we had put an on an in blah blah blah. On the house front, we had put an offer in on a house and it was accepted. We were utilizing the VA home loan process, and so they're very nitpicky. And they had found something wrong with the property that had to be addressed before we could close. And it was just so stressful watching the days just click closer towards our induction date, knowing the issue hadn't been addressed, we hadn't closed on our home. And it actually got to the point where like we had to go to our realtor and our broker and tell them like how stressful this was for us and like say if we can't close by X date, then like you can't be bothering us. Like, like then we're not going to be able to close for a while because like we're going to have a freaking baby. You guys know this, and this is like causing us so much stress. And as a result, we were kind of worried about like losing the house. So the day before my induction is honestly the perfect picture of how like stressed and busy we were. So at 8:30 a.m., I was on a work call with a new funder that honestly like did not go at all how I expected and made me very nervous for being gone for the next 3 months. Like a lot came up. While I was on the phone on that call, my husband is driving us to our appointment to sign the papers to close on our house. So, yay, that was happening, but like literally working on the way to this appointment. We close on the house. Directly following that appointment, we have to go to my doctor to do a final check on the baby and have that little balloon inserted. Then we have to go home to finish getting everything ready, hopefully have some time to ourselves and see if I go into labor. That was a lot. I did have some mild contractions, but no dice on the balloon, like truly inducing labor. So the next day, our induction appointment was scheduled for 5 p.m. So we had some time to relax, make some final preparations. I honestly remember being so excited. My husband and I took a selfie in the waiting room of the labor and delivery ward, and I've had multiple people like see that photo and comment on like how happy and re relaxed we looked for two people whose lives were about to just like be totally turned upside down. But it's how we felt, honestly, and I'm really grateful for that. Before before we get into the hospital stuff, maybe it's now a good time to talk about birth plans and why we chose to give birth at a hospital. So, if you're pregnant for the first time, you're going to hear a lot about how you need to create a birth plan. I recently watched like a hilarious like video about how much like conflicting information you're getting when you're pregnant. And when she talked about the birth plan, she pretends she pretends like she's reading like an article telling her what to do. And it literally says like make sure you write out a detailed birth plan, but no it will not go as planned. So crumple it up and toss it right into your hospital bag. You will need that queen. And like that, let's just say that's perfectly a perfect hilarious summary of what you're told. The birth plan is essentially this written doc that includes all your preferences for when you're giving birth to provide your doctor, midwife, doula, whoeves. So, like things like, do you want to move around while you're in labor, be able to drink fluids, have an IV for fluids, use a birthing ball, a stool, a chair, a peanut, etc. Do you want to be in a pool or be able to use like water in a warm shower? Who do you want in the room? Do you want an epidural? Are you storing umbilical cord? Blah, 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 blah. You can see how this is a little overwhelming for a first timer who doesn't, like, you don't know how you're going to feel in that moment, but you're trying to plan for it. Hmm. Even stuff like, do you want a mirror to see your baby's head coming out of you? Or does that image terrify you to your core and you don't offer me a mirror? That kind of stuff. It's really a lot to think about. And I didn't even know how I was going to feel. No one can. So how could I prep for what I was going to want in that moment? And this is why they tell you to know it won't go as planned and because you can't know how it will go. So it's important not to like over plan or like rely on the plan for comfort and confidence. But it is important to spend at least some time giving these things thought. I personally did not like write out a plan, but I did like jot down some notes, give it some thought, and my plan was to stay flexible. I was open to an epidural, but I wanted to see how I felt in the moment. I was open to lots of visitors while in labor after delivery, but I only wanted my husband and possibly my mom like there in the room for me for the big moment. My husband loves to recount when my mom and brother were chilling in the room with us while I was laboring. And when the doctor came in for an exam, I was a little high on my epidural. And I suggested my brother step out unless he wanted to see my bits. My brother, I mean, my husband talks about it all the time and really laughs. So, like, do you want people in there for these sorts of things? And who do you want in there? I felt really strongly about having music playing. Hilariously, didn't turn music on once while I was there. I wanted to have hot water available to be like on my body somewhere, somehow. I was really disappointed when I learned that the hospital couldn't accommodate a birthing pool. But some of this other stuff, like I just was really open to. I wanted to be able to respond to my body, my emotions, and my needs in the moment. And I wanted also to like hear from the professionals. Um, there was a lot I didn't know, and so I did put a lot of trust in them to provide me options and information in the moment to help me make decisions. So, anyways, that was the birth plan. And then, of course, you've heard me say I have this like fear of not feeling in control of my body. And for whatever reason, being in a hospital like helped ease that for me. Like knowing that I could have like access to all the people, all the specialists, all the drugs, all the equipment to address anything that could happen helped put me at ease. Between birth one and two, I had two friends and family members do home births. And woo, do I respect those women. Hearing them share their stories did make me rethink if I wanted to do the hospital again and try something different. I knew a home birth would not work for me. Too scary for me personally, too many unknowns, not enough people, equipment. But I did look into birthing centers, which are kind of this in between, and I heavily considered that. I knew the second time around I'd be open to doing it naturally, but was going to feel better about that if I could have like a birthing tub, which you can have in a birthing center, or at least here in Austin, because like water is so soothing to me. My like number one daily self-care is a hot shower. Being in water, whether it's a pool or a lake, like that feeds my soul. And so I was very attracted to the idea of being in water, whether for birth or pain or stress management. Um, but ultimately, and I was disappointed that the hospital couldn't accommodate that, but ultimately, like being the recovering control freak I am, I was drawn back to the hospital just because it was known, like for the second birth. And I liked having the options, even if a pool wasn't one. Who knows if there does happen to be a next time, the pool may be more important, plus I'd be a pro by then. Anyways, so back to birth one and checking into the hospital for our let's have a baby appointment. We had to wait a long time to even get into our room and get assessed, fill out the paperwork, and like even hear what the plan was. And honestly, I knew next to nothing about like what to expect from induction. So, and on that note, actually, I later learned, like after I had given birth, that induction meds often make contractions a lot more painful than in natural labor. That ended up explaining a lot about my experience. And while I kind of was pissed that I like didn't know that going into it, I guess I'm also kind of grateful in the ignorance is bliss type situation. Really quickly, they ask you like, do you know you want an epidural? Because there's paperwork to sign. I told them I was open to it, but I didn't want to commit to it. And so they explained then, okay, what happens next? They're going to start the induction by putting this little pill up in your hoo-ha and monitoring your progress. And at some point, then they would start me on Pitocin, a Pitocin drip, and they would break my water if necessary. So, and then labor, have a baby. So I said, all right, let's do this. I think it wasn't until like 4 hours after our appointment time, so like 9 p.m., that I was even like given the first like induction medication. They also have to get you set up for an IV. I'd never had an IV. I don't have great veins, so they had to stick me in my wrist. And I'm not gonna lie, that was like one of the worst parts of the whole experience. I feel like I could not move my left hand without pain. And so in the 20 hours that I was there, it got like super swollen and I lost feeling and love that for me. Anyway, so they tell me to expect some cramping from this little pill, which they describe should feel like similar to like a very serious period cramping. And I felt like that was pretty accurate. It was uncomfortable, but nothing that wasn't too familiar. I remember thinking, wow, like I got this. Like maybe I won't need the epidural. Like again, ignorance. So hours go by, they're checking me. On that note, service checks are pretty awful. Really feels like they're elbow deep in there, just digging around. Like, hey, I'm a person, not a junk drawer. Anyway, so eventually, okay, let's get you on the Pitocin drip. The pain honestly still felt manageable, and I kind of just like felt like I was a superhero. More checks. They're hoping my water's gonna break. It's not. So ultimately, they break my water. And they do warn me that, like, once my water breaks, things are going to start to feel different. And man, were they not kidding. Within minutes of them breaking my water, I started getting my big girl contractions. And those bad boys were lasting 60 seconds and coming every 90 seconds and hurt like a mother. So, yeah, do that math. I was getting 30 seconds to rest before being torn apart again. And in my birthing class, they had emphasized that the breaks between contractions, like the pain completely goes away. And so like I had taken so much solace in that, like, okay, I'll get a break. If I get a break from the pain, like I think I can do this. 30 seconds is not a break. No me gusta. That was like barely time for me to catch my breath again. And it certainly was a pain, like unlike anything I could describe. Felt nothing like period cramps. Um, I really wanted to do this naturally, though. Like, I wanted to try. So I started trying different things, walking around, using the birthing ball, laying in different positions, sitting in different positions, like you name it, I tried it. And not one single thing gave me even an ounce of relief. I quickly found that like I needed to have my feet on the ground. Like as weird as that sounds, like this actually I guess it's not weird because that's something when I fly too, like I have to press my feet firmly into the ground. It like helps me feel in control. I don't know. So like that was the same here. But even that was like not really helping me manage the pain. So after about an hour of what I will refer to as like real deal laboring, like I needed reinforcements, man. It was time for the epidural. So I'll be real. People have a lot of opinions about what constitutes a quote unquote natural birth. And some people, whether that be people you know, strangers on the internet, people writing blogs, articles, etc., some people will make you feel like you're weak or not as strong as other moms if you don't fit their definition of a natural birth. Some definitions are really strict, saying a natural birth means a vaginal birth, no medication. Some might say it's a vaginal birth without an epidural, but like induction meds are fine. Others might say it just means having a vaginal birth. And I just want to call BS on all this rhetoric right now. We all need to stop placing expectations and judgment on how women give birth. Just stop it. Stop it. A lot of us, or a lot of this, like we're not in control of. And even when we are, this is extreme trauma to our mind, body, and spirit. And it's my body, so I don't need your opinions. I was told I had to be induced for both pregnancies. I did all the things to try and induce labor naturally, and they didn't work. Not my choice. Having an epidural, absolutely my choice. A choice I made for me and no one else. I have a friend who had a previous condition and surgery where she knew she would have to have a C-section no matter what happened with her pregnancy, no matter what her preference was either. And honestly, fuck the rhetoric that says an elected C-section is taking the easy way out. A C-section for me sounds like my worst nightmare. And did you know that if you have a C-section, you're given 8 weeks of sick leave versus 6 weeks for a vaginal birth because it's more traumatic to your body and you require longer to heal? So, like, we're doing what feels right for our bodies. We don't need to be made to feel that we're less than because of those choices. So, quit it. And now I'm off my soapbox, at least for now. Back to me, and my experience. So, it takes about a half hour for the anesthesiologist to get there, and about another 15 minutes for him to like get everything set up, and then another 15 to 30 minutes for it to actually take effect. Um, And like, if you're like me, like I certainly have heard the misconception that there's like a point at which you're not allowed to get an epidural. Um, I had heard that and I was kind of like terrified of reaching this like point of no return. But it turns out like there's not really a point of no return. It's more just that there's a point in labor where you like likely can't sit still enough to like safely be administered an epidural. So it's more about your ability to sit still. And so as I was waiting for the a magical drug dealer to get there, I began to grow concerned that like I wouldn't be able to sit still. And the idea of someone shoving a large needle into my back was only, slightly terrifying. It got even worse when, as I sat at the edge of the bed, my feet hanging over the side but firmly planted into the ground, which was important to me, he began to raise my bed. My toes lifted off the ground, and I certainly began to panic. I said, hey, can we, I need my feet on the ground. Like, can we lower the bed? And his very legitimate response was that he needed my back to be in a position for him to safely insert the needle from a standing position. And he was a tall man. So cool, cool, cool. That's legit. But now, like, this was the only thing helping me think I could get through this and be able to sit still. And my amazing husband, like, certainly saw the panic in my eyes and acted so quickly. He was sitting on a stool in front of me, holding my hands, and he instantly just like spread his legs so I could place my feet firmly on the stool and like press into it. Love that man. The epidural was scary, but honestly, not as scary as I had expected it to be. I think because at that point I was already in a lot of pain and like I knew this was my relief. I also did not realize that epidurals came with pain meds. Like I thought it was just the numbing thing. So my epidural had fentanyl in it. And so soon enough, not only was I mostly numb from the waist down, but I was super buzzed. Hanny was feeling good. And for me, honestly, it was that feeling that confirmed I had made the right decision. Like all of a sudden, not only did I feel like I could do this, but I felt like I was going to kill it. Like I was feeling so confident and that was huge, confident, and that was huge for me. Um, and of course, my friends and family got some good laughs out of my company as well. No major surprises here, but after that, I don't have the best memory of what all was going on until it was kind of time to push. I remember getting checked on a lot. I remember my girl kept moving around and they kept losing her heartbeat, so they were constantly coming in to adjust sensors. I remember my husband watching him sleep. Like, how daring, but all right. I remember watching a lot of TV, and my family and friends were there, so a lot of conversations and things like that. And while I could somewhat feel my legs, I really felt no contractions, no pain, no pressure. At some point, they told me it was time to start pushing. And really, the craziest thing to me was that it was only the nurse in there when she said that. So, like, you see in the movies, like, all these people, doctors, nurses, everybody's in the room, and they're saying, it's time to push. The doctor's telling you it's time to push. That's not the reality. It's just you, the nurse, and if you have someone in the room with you, that loved one. And it stays that way until the head is ready to come out. Also, pushing is not at all the way they show it in the movies. All that yelling the women are always doing, like, no way. The nurse asked me if I knew how to push, and I really didn't have any idea how to answer that question. So I think I awkwardly said something like, I don't know, let's be sure, please tell me. The way they tell you to push is pretty specific. And personally, I felt like there was no way I could possibly like scream and push at the same time. In fact, I honestly felt like I couldn't do anything at the same time as pushing. My husband was like tearing up and I legit like could not look at him. And he was like trying to talk to me and I was like, I get out of here. Like don't just hold my hand, hold my leg, do what she's telling you to do. But looking at him and talking to him was making me emotional and I felt like there was no way I could push and like cry. So I found a mark on the ceiling, I locked eyes with it and I pushed. And you push for like 10 seconds, which is honestly incredibly difficult. And hey, I wasn't even in pain and I'm saying this is difficult. I seriously I can't imagine pushing while being in pain. So, first and foremost, ladies who have done that, goddesses. We pushed for a little over an hour, just me, my husband, and the nurse, before the nurse said it was time to bring everyone in. And they mean everyone. Probably 6 to 8 people came into the room at that point, including my OB, though I honestly barely noticed she was there. Pushing took every ounce of my focus. They asked me if I wanted a mirror to be able to see Reese crowning. I said no, then yes, then no. I knew I would get too emotional. I wouldn't be able to push. Then they asked me if I wanted to reach down and touch her. Again, it was kind of like a no, yes, no, yes situation. So I reached down, I touched her head, which, damn, was something else, man. And I was right. It messed me up. And so I had to be like, nope, I got to refocus. And somewhere around that time, I also started feeling nauseous. I remember asking for something to throw up in. I threw up, pushed again, and there she was. And honestly, it is hard for me to recall what happened immediately after that. It was very overwhelming. I think they checked her out and then plopped her on my chest. Cody cut the cord at some point. And then, they're still down there working on you. And you can hear them talking about things that sound important and maybe even a little scary. But also, you have this beautiful creature, alive, breathing, sitting on your chest, making sounds. It's an experience I still can't really put words to. I honestly just like remember staring at her and touching her. It even felt weird to talk to her, like she was real, she was really here. Wow. I'm sure I also had like huge hormone surging, and that's probably where some of this like overwhelmed memory loss, situation's happening. But I also remember feeling really proud. Like, damn it, I did it. I did it. I wasn't sure I could do it, but here she is. Like, she and I, we did this thing. On the more medical side of things, I did have some tearing, some bleeding. They were having trouble stitching me back up, but it was nothing too scary. They did end up having to like pack me up with gauze soaked in like clotting agents, but I was like, who cares? I'm a mom now, and I have this beautiful creature to focus all my attention on. And they really do let you have like a decent amount of time pretty immediately after birth with the baby directly on your chest before they kind of take them to like weigh them, measure them, all that good stuff. They also are pretty quickly asking you to try to breastfeed them if you've decided you want to try that. Breastfeeding is a whole other thing, and I will talk a lot more about that, mostly in the postpartum part, because I think for me and for many women, it's the most difficult part of the postpartum experience. But what I will say here is that it is wild. This brand new human being pretty much knows what to do and starts looking for that thing almost immediately. And it's in those moments like it really reminds me like we're just animals. So we did some of that, and then they got us ready to move down to our mama and baby room. In an ideal situation, depending on when your baby was born, you only need to stay at the hospital 1 or 2 nights after birth, and that baby mama room is where you stay. So they helped me climb into a wheelchair since I still had very numb legs. And I remember looking at all the blood on the floor, like, oh yeah, I just did a physically traumatic thing. I was like so floored with all the joy of this new life that I was responsible for that I had kind of forgotten about the whole birth part in the matter of like an hour. So we get down to that room, and as we're getting settled into that room, my epidural starts wearing off. And that made me anxious. I was starting to feel pain. I was still packed with a ton of gauze. And even though I had just like killed it at birth and wasn't anxious or scared at all of a sudden the idea of them like being down there and like doing things without the epidural and feeling the pain already was beginning to make me kind of panic. And I won't go into any detail, but I will say like it wasn't great. They had to like pack and repack me. They took out my catheter only to say I needed another one and then changed their mind again, took it back out to find out I had hemorrhoids from pushing, which honestly were like almost as painful as contractions. I felt like I couldn't walk, and it felt pretty painful to like even sit or change positions in my bed. Then what no one told me is that as soon as you give birth, your boobs like triple in size, become hard as rocks, and really hurt. So like your this is your milk coming in. But yeah, it's awful. And I was not expecting it, so it was just like it caught me off guard. And then breastfeeding is really hard. You and your baby are learning something for the first time together. And unfortunately, like the stakes are incredibly high. I had taken a breastfeeding class before giving birth, but like once you're in it, it's a lot. Babies have to eat often. You're in pain, you're exhausted, and it's hard, but that doesn't matter. You have to do it if that's what you're doing. We also found out shortly after giving birth that because my daughter and I had different blood types, I had low-key poisoned her with my blood. Essentially, my immune system created antibodies that attacked my daughter's red blood cells, which causes too much bilirubin in their blood and causes them to have jaundice. And yes, I did just say bilirubin, like you should all know what it means. We did not. And we honestly thought it was just the cutest little name for something. And so we actually started calling our daughter Billy as like an affectionate nickname, and something we honestly still use today. Anyway, thanks a lot, buddy. So our girl was yellow. I remember when they told us the news, they said over and over, this is not a big deal at all, incredibly common. She's going to be totally fine. We just have to feed her a bunch, and then they were going to give her this like phototherapy sessions and a little baby tanning booth to like help it work out of her blood. The way they described it, like honestly, I was not worried at all. Um, when they told me and my husband, it happened that many of our friends or family were like in the room with us. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Go for it. Like let's get her fed. Let's get her in the tanning booth. I look over at my husband and he is in tears. And I remember looking at him and saying, they're saying it's okay, that she's totally fine, right? And he said, yeah, I don't know why I'm crying. And this was the first of many instances where fatherhood, and specifically fatherhood of a little girl, has melted my stoic Marine husband's heart. And honestly, it's one of my favorite memories from the birth experience. But unfortunately, this also meant that I had to be a literal milk factory. I had to feed her constantly, and when I wasn't feeding her, I had to pump. We will discuss pumping in the next episode. And then it still wasn't enough. So we had to sign off on allowing them to give her donor milk via a bottle. So our little girl was bottle fed from day one. Something I think definitely contributed to what would become our breastfeeding woes. It also put a ton of pressure on the breastfeeding experience. I remember when they were asking us to decide if we were comfortable with them giving her donor milk or formula, I didn't want to. Like, this was my job. I was supposed to be feeding my baby. And even though I knew something was going on that was making that harder, I still felt like a failure for not being enough. Not to mention that the thing that caused the problem in the first place was my blood. You spend 9 months being their literal home, keeping them safe. And on the way out, my body attacked her. And now my worthless boobs weren't doing what they needed to do to fix it. The feelings I experienced over this were intense. And I had even prepared myself for like those breastfeeding failure feelings, because I'd been warned about them. It wasn't my fault. I can't control my body and I can't control my baby. I knew those things. And yet, sitting in the hospital room, all I felt was that my body was failing my baby, that I was failing my baby. And my husband didn't understand. How could he? In the moment, I felt like he was pressuring me to allow them to feed her donor milk, and I couldn't believe he wasn't on my side. Looking back objectively, it's very easy to see that he was stressed, tired, and scared for our daughter. He wanted her to get better, and this is what the doctors were saying would make her better, and not what we should do. I think at some point he even said something like along the lines of like, Hannah, we need to make sure she's getting enough food. And I know that he meant, so let's do the thing they're saying will help make that happen. But I heard, because you're not enough. It hurt me in a way I'm not sure he even understands to this day. Though, don't worry, we've talked about it extensively. Like, we're good. We were both having a lot of emotions in the moment. And we even laugh about it now. Um, because when we were fighting about this, I was like bawling my eyes out. And this poor little male, like med tech, came in hoping to check my vitals. He quickly assessed what he was walking in on, and I remember him quietly saying or asking, "Is this a good time?" And me shouting, "No, it's not." And we never saw that poor man again. We'll talk a lot more about breastfeeding guilt in the next episode, but ultimately we decided to allow the supplemental feeding, but only because I felt like I had no other option. This also meant we had to stay at the hospital for almost 6 days for her to get her little tanning treatments and get her bilirubin levels down. After 2 days, they checked me out, so I was no longer a patient. Thankfully, they did allow us to keep our room for the duration of our daughter's stay. And when I was like in excruciating pain, the nurses did come back. Like they did like check on me and help me. Other than that, and the fact that our daughter was getting the care she needed, with each day at the hospital, my husband and I got less and less chill. We wanted to be home. We wanted to be home so badly. And every day they'd tease us with going home, only to be told she needed more treatment. Other than just the pure fact of wanting to be in our home, starting our new journey as parents, a couple of other factors played into fantasizing about breaking out of the hospital. It's uncomfortable, especially for the partner. There are thousands of memes and reels joking that the partner has it worse sleeping conditions or just has it worse because of the sleeping conditions for them at the hospital. But they are pretty brutal. The food isn't great either, and only the patient gets food delivered to them. And after 2 days, like I wasn't even a patient anymore. And if you've ever seen any of those reels on what it's like being on the maternity ward in a hospital with like the staff checking on you every 5 minutes, it's painfully realistic. You have nurses coming in to check on you. You have nurses coming in to check on the baby. You have residents and doctors coming in to check on you. Residents and doctors coming to check on the baby, different residents and doctors. You have technicians coming to take your vitals, what feels like every hour, baby's vitals. You have janitorial staff coming in to grab your trash and your dirty linens. You have cafeteria staff coming to drop off your meals. You have admin people coming in to talk to you about birth certificates and discharge. And you have lactation specialists coming in to tell you how to breastfeed. And that's not obviously not including like friends and family who may be visiting you. And then, of course, you have to feed your baby every 2 hours, change his diapers, tend to it when it's fussing. You really have no time to rest and certainly no quiet or private time. So after day two, we were really done with that. We did opt to have a lot of friends and family visit us, which was actually a very good thing for us. I'd say we probably had someone we knew and loved in our room at least 50% of the time that we were there. Not to mention, they were able to bring us delicious foods, drinks, many of which I had not been able to enjoy during pregnancy. I could definitely see how some people could find having guests cycling in and out overwhelming. But since it was already an overwhelming experience, it was actually felt nice for us to have people we loved around. Then we were told finally we could go home. And I cannot explain how relieved and excited I was. I think because we had been so ready to leave, I did almost like didn't have any anxiety about leaving. When I know a lot of parents will feel anxiety about leaving the hospital. Like, you mean I'm supposed to keep this thing alive on my own now? I have no training. But but I was so ready to go. We were both so ready to go. And honestly, I was still in so much pain that I was like more concerned about like me making it down to the car, surviving the car ride. I was nervous. I was nervous to drive like with her in the car for the first time, and I definitely sat in the back with my husband, like holding her little hand. But we made it home, and even though it was my parents' home that we were coming home to, it was such a relief. We could just be be a family. So that is my daughter's birth story. So on to birth number two for my son, which was about 4.5 months ago, almost 5 months ago. Leading up to the second birth, I felt ready to like have the baby a lot earlier than I had the first time. Being pregnant with a toddler was really difficult, and I was ready for that part to be over. As strange as it sounds, I was also ready for a break. I was ready to not have to do anything other than care for myself and my kids for 3 whole months. That honestly at the time felt incredibly attractive. And don't get me wrong, caring for yourself post-birth and two kids is not restful. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it was a different pace of life and something I was really looking forward to. The one part that did make me want to slow down was the fact that after this baby was born, we would no longer be a family of three. And as excited as I was about that, for to have two kids, to have Reese have a sibling, I was also sad. I was grieving the loss of my family as it was there in that moment, only having one child, that child being my absolute everything, and how like that must feel for her. It was never going to feel that way for any of us again. And so, in the month leading up to my induction date, we spent a lot of time, just the three of us, trying to soak in every moment and every memory we could together. But back to wanting to speed things up, my husband was also starting a new job 2 days after my induction date. And so we were both really hoping that maybe our son would come early, which would let him have a little extra time home with us. But every appointment came and they told me it probably wasn't going to happen. I did all the safe things they tell you to do to induce labor and even had a few spells of Braxton Hicks contractions, but no dice. This time, our induction appointment was an 8 a.m. on April 5th, a Saturday. I took the Friday off work, so I started my maternity leave a day early so that I could get all the things ready, my hospital things, the baby's things, get the house ready, pack up my daughter to stay with her, my mom and dad. And I also tried to take some time for myself. I remember holding Reese that night, like honestly trying to memorize everything about her. It would be the last time I held her as my only child. And I knew when I saw and held her next, she was going to seem so big. When it came to my feelings about the birth, I felt a lot like I had the first time, calm, ready. The morning arrived. We dropped Reese at my parents and we headed to the hospital. We got checked in. And of course, we're pros now, so everything seemed to be going pretty smoothly and as to be expected. Similar to last time, I wasn't 100% set on whether I'd get an epidural or not. I definitely felt like it was probably likely I was going to get one, but I still wanted to like feel it out and see how I felt in the moment. Um, Part of me quite literally wanted to feel it out. I really did like want to feel as much of the labor experience as I could. They started my induction medication with a little pill up the hoo-ha, and honestly, my cramps felt a lot worse than they had in the first birth. And so I began to get a little anxious. Like, if this was already more painful than last time, like, would everything be more painful? How was I going to survive any contractions? And it got to the point where, like, I couldn't lay on my side because it was so painful. But, like, then sitting up was also not comfortable because the bed was, and just my pregnancy was, like, killing my back in that position. And I could just not get comfortable. And it didn't let up. So after a few hours, I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and get the epidural. I think they had already started the Pitocin drip at some point within that too. And they weren't really happy about how I was progressing, so they were like, this is gonna be a while. So I was like, okay, let's go ahead. Um, they told us the anesthesiologist would be there in like 20 to 30 minutes. So genius that I am, I was told my husband, I was like, why don't you go get yourself a drink and some snacks before he gets here? So he's gone, and of course the guy shows up, and I was honestly really nervous about doing this without my husband. But of course, I'm a woman, so I didn't want to be an inconvenience. So I didn't ask if we could wait. I just had anxiety. But my nurse was incredible, and in that moment was my partner. She was holding my hands, looking me in the eyes. And about 10 seconds before needle time, my husband dashes in, slides in effortlessly. And it was good because the anesthesiologist did have some trouble finding the pocket, as he called it. And so he was like digging around in my spine for a good minute. But all is well, worked, the numbing and the drugs kicked in, and I was feeling good. This time I really didn't like feel that kind of like buzz, that high for very long at all. And I also started getting some feeling back in my legs. I wasn't like feeling pain, but I could start to feel pressure. At some point in this process, they also broke my water. So like the real deal contractions started coming, and I could feel the pressure of those kind of rising and falling, but without excruciating pain. And I actually really liked this. Like, I felt like I was getting to experience more of the actual feeling than I had with my daughter, but without a whole lot of pain. Um, but I did unfortunately have some sort of reaction to the epidural. And so I was starting to regain feeling on my right side, and my left side was just like getting worse, like, like less and less feeling to the point where it was completely perished. It perished. I couldn't feel it at all. And so the ideal situation for an epidural is that you feel pressure but no pain, and that you're able to retain like some control of movement of your legs. And my left side was completely dead to the world. And then more feeling was coming back to my right side, which then like started to make me concerned because I didn't necessarily want to up my drugs because my left side was so far gone, and it honestly was kind of like starting to freak me out. But I also was worried that I was going to start feeling like a lot more pain on my right side if I didn't up the drugs. And let's be real, like, what was I going to feel in my vagina when this like little baby started coming out? And I was really nervous about it. So I think I did up the drugs once, and honestly, I didn't feel any difference. Um, so I was a little worried about the reaction I was having to the epidural just because it was so like literally one-sided. And then also like my skin, it made my skin like itch like crazy. So I was like constantly having my husband like itch my entire body. And then every time they came and checked on me, they just told me, hey, you're not really progressing. And they were thinking I was going to be here for a while. And I was really disappointed. Everyone tells you second babies come a lot quicker. And this was not feeling quick at all. But despite that, when our daytime nurse got off at 7, so like almost 12 hours after we'd been there, she was like, I know you're having this baby today. Like, I'll see you in the morning, sort of thing. I was like, all right, sure. My nighttime nurse came in, and she was not messing around. She like wanted to get things moving, so she had me like changing positions like crazy, trying to see what could like help me progress a little more. Changing positions was pretty difficult because of my dead left leg, but she made it happen. My husband made it happen. Since I could feel the pressure of the contraction, she asked me to kind of let her know, like, if the pressure ever kind of stopped rising and falling and just like remained constant. And if it was remaining constant, that was going to be the indicator that it was time to start pushing. But it kept rising and falling. So I was like, okay, guess it's just we're still doing this thing. She was also having trouble keeping track of little man's heart rate. So she came in and told us that she had called the OB resident to come in, and she was gonna reach up inside and place a little monitor on the top of his head just to make sure they could accurately track his heart rate. Now, I feel like this is an important time to tell you that the nurses don't really examine you down there. They administer your meds, help you change positions, monitor your vitals, like do your catheter if you have an epidural, that sort of thing. But they're not really looking down there. And I'm sure they may not be told to. They're told that's the doctor's job or whatever. But just That's important. So, like, she's not checking me. So the resident comes in around 9 p.m. that evening. So we've been there a little more than 12 hours. She's gloving up and explaining what she's going to do, showing me like the little heart rate monitor they're going to attach to his head. Yeah, okay, simple enough. Go for it. We're like so relaxed. We've been told we're not having this baby anytime soon. My husband's like rummaging around in his bag, like looking for something. So the doc like pulls back my blanket, my little gown. She opens my legs up and she's like, "Oh, oh, that's a head." I'm like, "What? What?" And my husband had just like turned around walking up to me and I just see his eyes dart down there and they go like wide as saucers. Baby boy's head is legit halfway out of my body. So they instantly tell me like, "Please don't push." And they call for the whole birthing team to come in ASAP, which I feel like they did within like 90 seconds. Within 90 seconds, like 8 people are in the room. They tell me to push. I give the weakest little, and my son is born. Hell yeah. That's the birth experience I was hoping for. Um, as ideal as that was, like I was so confused and overwhelmed in those 60 seconds. They said I had, they said I was progressing so slowly and I was still feeling the pressure of the contractions rise and fall. First go around I had pushed for like an hour before I'd even gotten to the point of crowning. So like how had this happened without anyone realizing it? I mean, obviously I wasn't supposed to realize it because I was like pretty numb down there. But it was just wild. Like a whole baby's head was like 50% out of me and like no one knew it. And then I was like, oh, okay, I have to push now. I hope everything's okay. Here he is. It was like so fast. And everything was okay. I heard him cry and they placed him on my chest. I had done it again. Wow. So because the birth was so quick, I didn't have a lot of trauma, which was such a better experience than last time. My main concern that time was like what was happening to my left leg. Like, why was it like literally dead? I couldn't feel it at all. And like I said, I was really getting concerned. Like, it was so far gone that they couldn't even safely get me into a wheelchair. So they had to like wheel me down to the maternity ward in my bed. And I remember when the feeling like finally started to come back to my leg, I was like, okay. Like I was super weird. Like, is it, I'd had a cousin who dealt with some like numbness after birth that like lingered for a really long time. And so I was just like really freaking out. Like, I need to feel my leg. But I got it back. Um, but also I remember that like the most important thing we wanted to know was like, did this baby have my blood type after what had happened to my daughter? Like, I do not want to be in the hospital for another 6 days while he gets some tanning treatments. Because I had had him late at night, I think it was like 9:30 or something. Um, I don't think we found out until like the next morning that, hallelujah, we did in fact have the same blood type. He didn't have any bilirubin issues. So they told us we'd stay Sunday night, because that was Saturday night. They told us we'd stay Sunday night. They'd schedule for him for his little snip snip Monday morning, and then we'd get to go home. Thank goodness. And if you remember, my husband had new employment orientation for his new job on Monday. It was a completely new EMS organization starting, breaking off from another org he had been working for. So it was every single employee's first day in orientation. And because of that, like I really didn't want him to miss it. Yes, we were still in the hospital, but like things were good, right? They just told us everything was good. He was healthy. And first thing in the morning, they were going to give him a check, make sure he was good for a circumcision, go immediately to the procedure, monitor for him an hour, then we get to go home. So I confidently told my husband, go to work, go to orientation. So Monday morning, he goes. Not too long after he left, they come in to take my son back to kind of do all the blood work and check before doing the procedure. And I remember sitting in that room like completely alone, thinking it was really nice to have a moment to myself. But unfortunately, not too long after, the pediatrician came in and said we needed to talk about Bellamy's glucose reading. Because I had had gestational diabetes for this pregnancy as well, they checked the baby's blood sugar a lot while you're in the hospital. They had been really happy with his readings up until that morning. His blood sugar was low. Now, I'll just say this. This doctor had like a very interesting bedside manner. His speech patterns, facial expressions, body language were like really hard to read. Nothing bad, just hard to read. And so he was explaining to me that my son's blood sugar was low, which definitely meant he couldn't get his procedure that morning. It also meant that they needed to intervene, which meant he would immediately require supplemental feedings, either formula or donor milk. Sound familiar? He essentially just wasn't getting enough food from me. The doctor also explained he would need to consult with the NICU because technically a low blood sugar result requires admission to the NICU. But since he'd been doing so well, they were hoping they wouldn't need that, that he wouldn't need that. He then explained that the reason they need to intervene now is because when a baby's blood sugar gets to a certain low number, it can lead to seizures, which can lead to brain damage. This doctor's demeanor was so calm and friendly, so I was calm. I got it. He was just telling me that we needed to act now so that the blood sugar wouldn't continue to dip so low, and get to that like number. So I wanted to know what is that low number where like we're at risk of the seizures, so I could be prepared in case his sugars continue to drop. And that doctor looks me dead in the face and he was like, "Oh, that he's already there. That he's already below that number." And my chest and throat like instantly clenched. Like, I'm sorry. Like, lead with that. You're telling me right now my baby is at risk for seizures and brain damage. So I was no longer okay, and I was completely alone. He kept trying to talk to me, and he needed me to sign off on allowing them to give him supplemental feedings. And the truth is, I wanted him out of my room immediately. I knew I was mere seconds away from like guttural animal crying and screaming. He could see that I was struggling and he was trying to comfort me, but like honestly, I was like, I needed him to leave. I needed to be alone. So I just was like, I signed the form, said thank you, please keep me updated. Trying to act like I wasn't about to just like completely lose it. So he left the room and I exploded into a million pieces. Um, I'm like honestly surprised like the nurses didn't like run in, like from my screaming. Um, My mind instantly went to the bad place, the place that blames yourself for things you're not in control of. All I could think was how familiar this sounded. With my daughter, the difference was they told me no risks. Like, she's totally fine. This is fine. She'll be fine. Now they were telling me my son could have seizures and brain damage. My 36-year-old, my 36-hour-old son. But in both instances, my son and my daughter, all I could think was that my body had done this to them. In the case of my daughter, my blood had poisoned her. In the case of my son, my stupid broken placenta had made it harder for him to regulate his sugars. It was my fault. And in both cases, the cure to their ailments was me successfully feeding them. And in both cases, the doctors were telling me I had failed and that I would either need to use formula or some other woman's breast milk, and that my babies would have to be bottle fed basically from day one. In that moment, alone in the hospital, all I could think was that I had failed him. He was sick because of me, and even though my body had the power to make him better, it had failed to, and I felt completely helpless. All I wanted in that moment was for Cody to be there, to tell me it was going to be okay, that Bellamy would be okay, that it wasn't my fault, and to hold me. But he wasn't there. And he wasn't there because I had told him to go. I texted him asking him to step away from the orientation to call me as soon as possible. I'm honestly surprised he could even hear my words over the phone because of how horribly I was crying. And I can't imagine how much it must have hurt his heart to hear me like that and to not be there with me physically. He talked to his bosses. They told him he could leave if he needed to. At that point, I had also called my mom and she was on her way. So I told Cody to stick it out, but that I would let him know if I changed my mind. This news also meant we'd have to stay another night at least. And adding to this was the fact that that day, that Monday, where I'm getting all this news, what Monday, that day was my daughter's second birthday. And she had come to visit us the day prior, and I truly can't even begin to describe the joy in watching her meet and hold her brother for the first time. But I had been so looking forward to being home when she got home from daycare on her birthday and getting to celebrate her. Being in that hospital, I missed her in a way I never had before. Um, oh, it's also probably the right place to mention that they had put us in the same mother baby room that we had been in 2 years prior. So it was bringing up a ton of memories from her birth. And I was devastated that not only was I going to spend another night away from my daughter, but that it would be on her birthday. It did help having my mom there, and I wanted Cody to be at orientation, but it was really hard not having him there that day. Like, when you're having a hard time and sometimes you just want to be alone. I certainly have those times, but when I'm really hurting, I want to be alone, but with my husband, if that makes sense. He's my safe place. He's my place where if I need to be distracted from feelings of sadness or pain or anger, or if I want to talk about my feelings or be comforted, he's where I go. And this was the biggest instance I've had so far of wanting to be alone, but with my husband. I couldn't be alone. That was way too painful. But I also didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to feel like I had to act a certain way. And while I am incredibly comfortable with my mom and many others in my life, my husband is the only person I feel 100% um, comfortable like being my complete self in front of, the good, bad, and the ugly. And on that day, I was experiencing a lot of bad and a lot of ugly. Reflecting back on it, I wish I would have asked him to come home, or not home, to come to the hospital. But hey, we survived it. A perfect example of like needing him there and he wasn't there was dealing with the breastfeeding nonsense. I had just been told that the cure to my son's ailment was feeding him, so we needed to get better at this fast. They had the breastfeeding consultants come in more frequently, and they had me triple feeding. Breastfeed the baby, bottle feed the baby, then pump. Rinse, repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. And it wasn't going very well. It hadn't gone very well with my daughter either. I'll elaborate that on the next episode. So I was prepared for how that might make me feel, and what I might want to do about it. Seriously, let me just say this. Do not let anyone tell you fed is best, but fed is best, period. I watched a hilarious video the other day of someone poking fun at the judgment around feeding your baby. Her quote was, "Fed is best, but breast is better." And ultimately, she ended the video by repeatedly saying, "I win, I win." And this is really how it feels out there. There's so much judgment, guilt, and shame. And I did not want to fall prey to that again. So I had told myself that I was going to give my breastfeeding my all, but if it was starting to impact my mental health, I would drop it and I'd be okay with that. Well, 2 days in, it's already affecting my mental health, but I certainly didn't feel like I was ready or could give up. I wanted to give it my all, but there was just so much pressure on feeding him. It was a horrible way to start the breastfeeding journey. And the same way my breastfeeding journey had started with my daughter. You got to figure this out because their health depends on it. Like right now. And right now, if you can't figure it out in the next 5 seconds, we have to introduce bottles and formula or donor milk or whatever. The decisions were made for me. And while I could take comfort in that, while I could take comfort in that, I didn't. So they began to bombard me with lactation consultants. One was awkwardly the sister of one of my male friends in high school, and I'm like, okay, here's my boob. One of the side effects of both the bilirubin issue my daughter had and the low blood sugar my son had is lethargy. So these babies are tired. They are so tired that surprisingly they have little interest in feeding. They want to sleep. So you're literally having to like mess with them, strip them down so they're cold, touch their bare skin with cold wipes, tickle them, poke them, like etc. to wake them up enough to feed them. And honestly, it kind of began to feel cruel. And when the consultants are there, they're like right up on top of you, doing all this light torture to your baby, right alongside you, encouraging you to do the torture, making it feel like we're ganging up on them. And it's honestly felt aggressive. It's a lot of quick and aggressive advice and change ups. Try this position. Now this one. Do this. Do that. And just like last time, they'd look at my poor little baby showing zero interest in this activity and just kind of say, okay, keep trying, mama, do your best. Later, I would find out I was paying for these visits, something they don't tell you in the moment, which did not feel good. They were, will say, more helpful the second time because I had breastfed before and so I could ask better questions. But a lot of times they still ended up kind of throwing up their hands and saying some version of, this is normal, but also keep trying because you need to figure it out ASAP. And they also often suggest that your partner help you. So they'll engage the partner in helping hold the breast, your nipple, to poke, torture the baby, etc. So sometimes, in addition to having a literal baby on your nipple, you have 2 to 3 adults up in your face poking at you and the baby. And so on the day that Cody wasn't there, these consultants legit asked my mom to be his double and help. They didn't ask me if I was okay with that. They didn't ask my mom if she was okay with that. And because I was so caught off guard by it, I didn't even know how to react and I didn't say anything. So now I have my mom also right up in there, looking at my nips, touching my boob, accosting my poor son who's trying to sleep. Not to mention, I was like barely hanging on emotionally. And in my head, I was playing this like alternate reality tape where I just like started screaming and like throwing them off me and ordering them to get the hell out of my room. But instead, I sat there and smiled through the teeth. And it was fucking horrible. My husband came back that evening after his orientation. My parents brought my daughter. They brought some food, some cake, and we had a little birthday celebration. And that healed my soul completely. And in the morning, we pressed reset. His results came back and they were good. He got his little circumcision and we got to go home. So those are my birth stories. Um, I don't know really what else to say about it than that. Those are my birth stories. And what comes next, what will come next in next month's episode will be the postpartum experience, which I am very much still living in, with my son, almost 5 months postpartum. And what I will say, my advice when like reflecting on and thinking about the birth experience is do what's right for you. And don't let anyone make you feel any sort of negative way about the decisions you make. This is trauma. It is, let's be honest, physical trauma, emotional trauma, and it's amazing too. And it's our body. So I don't want to hear people talking about, oh, you got an epidural, oh, you got a C-section. Well, I did it like naturally. Yes, you did it naturally. You're a freaking goddess. Like literally, I will say that. But don't judge other women. A lot of times, and I just want to remind people too, with a lot of these things, we don't have a choice. The choices are made for us often. And even if they weren't, and even when they're not, and it is our choice, it's our freaking choice. It's our body. It's our birth story. So if you've given birth or if you're preparing to give birth, this is your journey. This is your story. Don't let anyone make you feel a certain way. And people who are listening to people's stories, don't make anyone feel a certain way. Don't judge. Don't judge. Don't compare. It doesn't do us any good. And it's what causes this go through it in the shadows, grit your teeth. Like you've heard me say this through different times where like I didn't advocate for myself or I let someone make me feel a certain way, and I didn't speak out. And various times, especially in my second pregnancy, I did work through some of those things. And every time I set a better boundary or advocated for myself, I felt so much better. Um, and it's hard. We care a lot about what other people think. And that happens no matter what we're doing, but this is such a transformative and personal experience. But because it's child rearing, because so many people do it, it's become so like regular that we all feel entitled to have our opinions about it. And that, you know what? You just don't. You just don't. So that's my advice. Stop having opinions about other people's freaking birth experiences. Listen to them, ask them what they thought about their experience. What are their fears and concerns if they're going into this? How can you be supportive? Um, if we have more of that, more women will speak up. They'll feel confident advocating for themselves. They'll get more support. And ultimately, not only does that help them, but it helps their families. It helps their babies. Um, and we're all always talking about, oh, the children are our future. Let's freaking act like it, right? And it starts at supporting their mother and their parents. So do that. That's my advice. Thank you guys for listening to my stories. I hope it wasn't too weird or gross. In some instances, I really appreciate being able to share this part of my life with you all. It's been so huge and transformative for me. And I hope you join us next month to hear about postpartum life. And then I promise you guys, we are done with the It's a Mother series. And we'll have some other exciting topics coming down the pike. Thanks again for joining us on the Veteran Spouse Network podcast, brought to you in collaboration with Coming Home Well. We thank you for listening today and hope today's session left you feeling a little more connected or gave you some insight into the experiences of our military and veteran families. Don't forget to check us out at veteranspousenetwork.org to learn more about how our military and veteran families can receive the support they deserve.